my name is Alan Ross, and this is a profile from Transformer Technology. My guest today is a third generation leader of Niagara Transformers, John Darby. But John is gracious enough to join us from Niagara Transformer. I've got a lot of questions about Niagara, your past, your present, and your future. So let me start with this one. You have been around. This is your third generation. Is that correct?
That's correct. I'm the third generation.
All right. So, John, you got to go back because I'm fascinated by companies that have lasted that long. That means you're over 100 years old. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, almost 100 years old. So our history goes back, Ellen, and thank you very much for having us today. We appreciate the time and the opportunity. Our history goes back to 1924. My great uncle immigrated from Guelph, Ontario, Canada, into the Buffalo metropolitan area. And if you know your history of the industrial Great Lakes, that was a very vibrant area of the country in the 1920s. He gravitated to our area because there's a tremendous amount of industrial infrastructure built up around the Great Lakes and Niagara Falls. And he opened a business in 1924, primarily starting to do repair work. So repairs on motors, electromagnets, switchgear, transformers, for that heavy industrial base that surrounded the Great Lakes. By the latter 1920s, our industrial customers began asking us to consider making new transformers to fill a market void. And so in 1933, we began making new industrial transformers, followed 10 years later in 1943 with an expansion into the utility grade transformer market. So this dichotomy between making heavily engineered industrial transformers and sophisticated utility transformers that we do today, that product mix really has lasted almost 100 years.
That is amazing. That really is amazing. I know we've joked about this, and you, when you shared this with me, which I'm going to share right now, I usually say that I think the best transformers were made by a company called Westinghouse back in the 1970s. And John said, well, no, they weren't. They were made by us, and they put the Westinghouse label on them. So I can safely say for the last 15 years, I have been saying the best transformers have been made by Niagara Transformers back in the 1970s, which would indicate that you have a vision for the future. Because if that's true about the past, and I look behind you and I see a lot of different sizes and types of transformers that are made. But talk to me a little bit about the vision that you've got for the company going forward.
Sure. As you approach 100th anniversary and certainly 3 generations, that you focus a certain amount on your history, but obviously you also focus on what the next 100 years is going to look like. Right. And so we're in sort of an interesting apex, if you will, between history and future. And so it really gives us a good opportunity to go back and think about, what our vision is for the future. How are we going to interpret that in a rapidly changing business climate? And so from our viewpoint, really, it's what's old is new again. I think encapsulates our vision. And so one interesting aside, and you were so gracious to talk about our history, was our first utility customer that we began doing business with in 1943 is still an active customer today, over 75 years later. So you might ask yourself, how did you achieve that long-term partnership? And we really did that by living 2 words. And those 2 words are relationships matter. For us, even today, even in the digital Zoom age, we're having a Zoom call today and conversation, we really feel that long-term relationships really do matter in our business and our industry. We like what we call long-term marriages with our vendors, with our employees, and certainly with our customers. So we think investing in relationships is the key to our success today and fundamental to the vision of how we're going to be successful in the future.
John, kudos to you, because that is the hallmark of excellence, as we call it. That's, if you have that in place, then you have somebody that if you sell to, you buy from, or you work for, you'd want to sell to, buy from, or work for. So good to you, good for you on that. There's another thing we look for. It is that unique value proposition. What is it that you bring to the marketplace? Now, we're talking about specifics. We've been talking about kind of abstract things, yeah. But what is the unique value prop that Niagara brings to the marketplace, to your customers?
Sure, Alan. I think, as I said, and what would imply by our long-term perspective in relationship building with our customers, we're not transactional in really any way. So our value proposition really underscores that. We consider it something like a four-legged stool, and the way we compete, the way we sort of live out our relationship matters mantra is really accentuated by four attributes. Number one, we think we have the best people in the industry. It starts with our technical ability. It starts with our deep engineering bench. We love taking on tough engineering challenges. Yeah. In today's world, where so many manufacturers are very focused on a specific product type, we're just the opposite. We're high mix, what they call high mix, low volume. So we'll take on engineering challenges that others, even much larger and much more complicated organizations, don't have the depth of bench to take on those engineers. And quite frankly, as an aside, that's how we did so much private labeling, not only with Westinghouse and GE, but also with Square D over the years. Because even though they were competitors some days, they were also very good customers other days, because we had the ability to take on one-off, individual, unique type of designs that they really didn't want to fool with. So we do that, of course, with great quality. We lead with quality in everything that we do. You can do unique and tough engineering challenges, but if you don't execute, putting quality first, then the engineering really doesn't matter. And we do all that in very, very competitive lead times. And obviously, we're sensitive to a lot of the continuous process industries that we deal with on the industrial side, processes, steel, electrochemical, mining, who are operating 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. You have to meet their schedule, not your schedule, their schedule. So being able to wrap great people, taking on tough engineering challenges, executing with terrific quality, and meeting the customer defined lead time, that really is the four legs that we compete on. That really, encapsulate us. So, if you have a challenge, or any of your viewers have a challenge, an engineering challenge that nobody else will take on, we likely will.
So you've just done something. So Transformer Technologies audience is primarily the utility market. EPRA, we are a membership organization of industrials. So when you mention steel, processing, any of those industries, that's where we live and breathe.
Sure.
And we, EPRA, is the big R, is reliability. Reliability starts with design. Just the mere fact that you have flexibility in your engineering approach to engineering design, then manufacturing something that would be normally hard for somebody else to do. And it always starts, reliability starts by design, and that starts by the engineering of the solution. So excellent, well done. Yes, and we will make sure our member companies know that when they have a need for an engineered by design solution, Niagara. So
we're their guys.
Unique value proposition. Thank you. Number one, how do you recruit them? Let's assume that we can do that. But after you recruit them, how do you really prepare them to handle the problems that are changing all the time? So what is it that you guys do uniquely at Niagara to be able to approach this need for next generation transfer of knowledge?
Well, I think it really starts, in our particular case, it starts with the leadership team. And as we discussed earlier on, our company is not only almost 100 years old, but it's approaching the fourth generation transitioning into the business. And so my son, who's finishing his studies at Cornell University, has already begun to plug in and learn the business from my point of view. But I can tell you, he looks at things very differently than I do. He looks at
Absolutely.
human resources very differently than I do. He looks at a lot of things. But, it's reassuring because as I did the same thing with my dad, and I know that my dad did the same thing with my great uncle, his uncle who started the firm. So it's a balancing act. And, having equal measure interest and aptitude in a business like ours, I think is essential. It really fundamentally important to any business, I guess. While at the same time, we want to be open to being innovative. We want to be open to looking for applying those fundamental business skills and engineering skills in new ways in a rapidly changing environment, not only for suppliers and customers, but certainly for employees. And I think that as we all have lived through this last year of significant and almost unbelievably quick changes and challenges, the last year has really underscored that. So, I think it starts with our leadership team and being open to new innovative ideas. Having a family at the core and now a fourth generation at the core, I think really provides the underpinning of how we approach not only recruiting technical engineering folks who we recruit all over the world, but also our local and national folks that supply our direct labor talent. We really are very, very selective about who we hire, even in today's very competitive marketplace for top labor. And we underscore it with that family approach. We're very selective about who we hire. And as a result of taking so much time, making sure that, again, using that term long-term marriage, we want to make sure that it's a partnership, not just good for the company, but good for the employee. And we spend a tremendous amount of time in the selection process. And then once somebody comes on board, we spend a tremendous amount of time giving them lots of ownership opportunities from the most junior person on the production floor all the way through engineering. So they have a sense of not only the family has their back, but they have a sense of ownership, because we don't want transactional employees. We want people that are committed long-term to quality, who are long-term committed to our success. And that's what we look for in employees, as well as what we look for in customers. I mean, we've had employees that have been 30, 40, 50. We've even had a 55-year employee. We have less than 0.5% turnover, which in today's marketplace is absolutely unheard of. Yes. So we tend to be very selective. We tend to make good decisions looking at both sides of the employment. We tend to do lots of training and engagement. And the results, I think, speak for themselves, at least in our business, where we have lots of long-term and committed employees. And, what we've learned, again, leading with quality, is if you don't have long-term committed employees, it's very difficult to have great quality. So if you're going to choose not to be a transactional company, then you can't be transactional in engaging your workforce either.
I was going to ask you about innovation and continuous improvement, but you've already touched on those. And just by the mere fact of how you go about serving customers, you have to be incredibly innovative in your approaches to their problems that you engineer in design. So we're going to do that one. But I do just want to give you a minute to talk about a little bit of the future. One of the things that impresses me, though, about Niagara is you're a company based in a tough state to do business in. New York is not the easiest. I think it's like number 48 on places to open up a new business. But you're American manufacturer, American made, so all of those made in America people can jump on the board. But you're also a global supplier. You don't just supply to the local market here. You're a global supplier. If I am one of those customers and I bought into the uniqueness of design and I bought into the quality and the excellence and the work that you do, just look at the industry and take yourself a decade or two out.
Sure.
What do you think's happening in our industry, and
Sure.
How are you connecting with it?
Yeah, and I think we looking at it from a macro point of view, there's some very exciting things that are going on that I think that we can as a company take advantage of. And you pointed out that we do our manufacturing in the United States, but we do have design offices in China. We do have design offices in Canada. So we are very familiar with taking advantages of the world expertise, inventory in other parts of the world, but we do convert that into our own execution here in the U.S. And it's obviously a very exciting time to take those strengths and focus them inwardly, if you will, because there's a number of things that I think are exciting that are going on. Number one, obviously, the EV market, the electric vehicle market, is just in its infancy. That is going to be a tremendous sustained market opportunity for those in my space. I also think renewables in New York State, we have a mandated 100% renewable generation edict by our governor, which we're pushing forward. So I think there's still a lot of runway left on renewables, particularly solar and battery storage. I think that presents us some great opportunities. A bipartisan U.S. infrastructure bill that they've been speaking about out of Congress and the Senate, led by our new president, Mr. Biden. That obviously would be very exciting in terms of making investments in energy efficiency, infrastructure redundancy, and continue to replace aging infrastructure that's long overdue. And finally, I think that there's been the pendulum swings back and forth, but I do think that there is a sense certainly from our North American customers and to some degree our European customers, they're really concerned about stretched supply chains. They're really concerned in a way that they've never been concerned before, particularly those that have pursued, 100% Asian-oriented supply chains are really concerned about access to products, access to technical support, access to quick and nimble response if in case there is a problem. And so I think that demographic shift is it's never going to go back to what it was in the 1950s, so to speak, nor do I think we want it to. But there is a movement back to really taking a hard look at redundancy and supply chains. And certainly Asian competitors offer a lot of cost advantages, but they're not a one-stop solution to all potential problems that our more sophisticated customers are recognizing. So I do think that in the case of shortening up supply chains, providing redundancy to supply chains that are focused outside of the North American market, I do think that also is going on and will enhance and sustain our business going forward. So, we're excited about reaching 100 years. We're excited about the fourth generation taking over. I think we're well positioned as a company. We're healthy. We've invested $45 million in our plant and equipment here in Buffalo. We have one of the world's most state-of-the-art facility to take on these opportunities that the macro environment is going to rapidly present us. So I'm super excited. I'm super excited about our prospects. And I think that, we'll balance sort of the old school value system that we have well against the opportunities that are rapidly evolving and presenting themselves to our market.
What is old is new again. This has been another profile, and we thank John Darby. We thank you for listening. This is Alan Ross from EPRE and Transformer Technology.